Hey there, in this video I'm going to show you how you can integrate the Drizzle ORM with Kinde Auth. So when a user signs in into your application with Kinde Auth, you can save the user inside a local database. That's a really great feature that you can use with the Kinde Auth and Drizzle ORM. So this video will be divided into two main sections. In the first section, I'm going to quickly show you how you can set up the Kinde Auth with your Next.js version 13 application, and if you know how you can do that, you can just skip to the second section in which we are integrating the Drizzle ORM with Kinde Auth in order to save your users into a local database. So let's get right into it. Okay, I open up a brand new Next.js version 13.4 application, and in the first section of this tutorial, I'm going to quickly show you how you can set up the Kinde Auth with your Next.js application. So as a first step, we need to install the Kinde Auth in our Next.js application. So I open up the terminal and here paste the script for installing the Kinde Auth. It is npm I at kind-oss/kind-auth-next.js. So I install this package. Okay, so I close this off and I go to the app directory, and inside it we're going to create a directory called API and then an auth directory, and then inside it we're going to create a dynamic route handler for Kinde Auth. So inside the square brackets I'm going to write Kinde Auth, and then inside this directory I'm going to create our route handler, route.ts file. Okay, and inside it we need to export a get function. So here I'm going to say export async function get. It takes two parameters. The first one is request, which its type is next request. And then in the second parameter, we need to extract the params from the props of this get function. So here first we define an interface for the props of this get function. I'm going to call it props. It has the params inside it, which is type of an object that has the Kinde Auth inside it, and its type is string. So remember that inside the square brackets here in our dynamic route we choose the params to be Kinde Auth. So here inside the params object we need to have a Kinde Auth, and then I go back to our get function, and now we can extract the params from the props of this get function. So first I'm going to put a empty object here and set its type to props. Okay, and now we can grab the params inside it. Okay, and then I'm going to define the body of the get function. First we need to define a constant called endpoint. So I'm going to say const endpoint and set it to the params.kindauth, and we should convert it to the type auth endpoints, which comes from the Kinde Auth. So here I'm going to say as auth endpoints, and as you can see it is imported from the Kinde Auth. So if I hover here, you can see the Kinde endpoints is just a union of string that has login, logout, register, Kinde callback, and create org. So the params.kindauth can be one of these endpoints. Okay, and as a last step in this function, we need to call the handle auth from the Kinde Auth. So here I just return the handle auth function, which comes from the Kinde Auth-Next.js/server, and then pass the request to it as well as the endpoint. Okay, so that's it for creating the dynamic route handler for the Kinde Auth. And as a second step here, we need to create some environment variable inside our env file for Kinde Auth. So as you can see, we have 6 of them. We must get the value of the first 3 variables from the Kinde Auth dashboard, which I will show you in a second, but the value of the second 3 variable is simply the address of our web application. And since we are in a dev server, we need to pass the address of our dev server, which is localhost 3000, the address of the Next.js dev server. But if you push your application in the production environment, you should put the actual web address of your web application instead of the localhost 3000. So now let me show you quickly how you can get the value of the first 3 variables from the Kinde Auth dashboard. Okay, I go to the kinde.com and I've already signed in. So I click on the manage Sakura dev, which is my username here, and I go to the dashboard or admin page of the Kinde Auth. I click on the settings here and then click on the applications here. Since we are using the Next.js, I go for backend app. So I click on view details here. And as you can see, we can choose a framework or language here. I chose the Next.js, and here you can get your domain, client ID, and client secret from the Kinde Auth dashboard. And here you should set your callback URL to the /API/auth/kind_callback. And here in this section, you can set your logout redirect URL, which typically is the address of homepage of your application. So you just copy these three variables, put your client ID here, client secret here, and your domain here. Okay, now I close this off. So now let me show you the main layout of our application. We have the app bar here, and as you can see, we don't need to wrap our main layout with a session provider. So here you can see we have a app bar here, and then render our pages after the app bar. So if I go to the app bar, you can see it has two links here, one to the home page and the other to the dashboard. And then we have a sign in button component. And if I click on that, in this component, first we check if the user is authenticated or not. In order to do that, we grab the get user function and also is authenticated function from the get kind server session, which comes from the Kinde Auth. And here we can get the user object from the get user function, and then we just call the is authenticated function. So here we check if the user is authenticated, we just put its name and also a logout link, which comes from the Kinde Auth. And this logout link will handle the user login out process for us. And if the user is not authenticated, we just render a login link which handle the login process of the Kinde Auth. So again, this login link comes from the Kinde Auth, and then inside it we can put a custom caption for our login link. That's it for the sign in button. So now let's run our application to see the result. Okay, I'm gonna say npm run dev, and let's open up the browser. Okay, so now if I click on the sign in, it seems we have a problem. So let's go back to VS Code and here. Okay, so let's go back to the route handler of the Kinde Auth, and here let's double check. Oh yeah, we have misspelled the params here. So let's fix it. Okay, let's copy that and paste it here, and also paste it here. Okay, so let's restart our server again. Okay, so now if I click on the sign in, you can see we have redirected to the sign in page of the Kinde Auth. So we just need to enter our email here. So I put my email and click on the login. It will send a code into my email. So I pause the video and go to my inbox and copy that code. Okay, now I paste the code here and click on the continue. It will redirect us to our home page, and we can see my name here. Okay, so this is really cool that we can easily set up an authentication system with our Next.js application. But there is a question here, how we can keep track of our users in a local database. In other words, when the user signing into our application for the first time, how we can save the user data in a local database. So in order to do that, we can integrate the Kinde Auth with Drizzle ORM. So in the next section, I will show you how you can integrate the Drizzle ORM and Kinde Auth and set up a local SQLite database in order to save the user data. So as the first step, we need to install the Drizzle ORM. So I go back to the VS Code and open up a terminal, and here install the Drizzle ORM and Better SQLite 3, which is a driver for SQLite. Okay, and since we are using the TypeScript, we need to install the types of our SQLite driver. So let's clear this off, and then I'm going to say npm i-d because it's a dev dependency, and then add types /better SQLite 3. Okay, and then we need to install the Drizzle kit. So here I'm going to say npm i-d Drizzle kit. Okay, so now we're good to go, and in the first step we need to create the schema for our users table. So inside this src directory, I'm going to create a directory called db, and inside it we're going to create the schema.ts file. If you're not familiar with the Drizzle ORM, I have a comprehensive course for Drizzle ORM, which its link is now on the screen. You can watch it and master the Drizzle ORM. So far, to the best of my knowledge, it's the most comprehensive tutorial for Drizzle ORM on YouTube. Okay, so let's go back to our tutorial, and here inside the schema file we need to create the users table. So here I'm going to say export const users and set it to SQLite table, and let's import it from the Drizzle ORM / SQLite core. And here we need to specify a name inside our database. So I'm going to go ahead with the users. Okay. And then we need to specify an object as a second argument, which defines the fields inside the users table. First, we need to create an ID field, which is going to be text. And let's name it inside our database to just ID. So let's first import the text function from the SQLite core, and then we can chain the primary key function, which set this ID field as the primary key of our table. So as you may notice here, we set the type of our ID field to text. We didn't set it to number type, and that's because Kinde Auth will generate a string key for us, so we set its type to text. Okay, and then we need to define the first name field, which again it is going to be a text. Okay, and then we need to define the last name, it is going to be a text, and finally we just need to define email field here. Again, set its type to text and set its name inside our database to just email. Okay, so now we are moving to the next section, which is creating a SQLite database and connect it to Drizzle. So inside the DB directory, side by side our schema file, I'm going to create an index.ts file. Okay, in the first step, we need to create a SQLite database. So here I'm going to say const SQLite and set it to new database, which is coming from the better SQLite 3. Okay, and then we need to specify the path of our database. So I'm going to put it in the root path of our project. So I just specify the name of our database, SQLite.db. Actually, the name is up to you and you can choose a different name for it. Okay, and in the next step, we need to connect our SQLite database with Drizzle ORM. So here I'm going to say export const db and set its type to better SQLite database, and let's import it from the Drizzle ORM / better SQLite 3. Okay, and then we set it to Drizzle function, which comes from the Drizzle ORM / better SQLite 3 again, and just pass our database instance to it, SQLite we have just created here. Okay, so far we have connected the Drizzle ORM with our SQLite database. And as a last step in this file, we need to call the migrate function, which create a migration from our schema file. So here I'm going to call the migrate. Let's import it manually. It is come from the Drizzle ORM / better SQLite 3 / migrator. Okay, and then inside it first we pass our DB client. Okay, and then we pass an object, and inside it we're going to specify the migration folder. Okay, and set it to just Drizzle because it will be in the root path of our project. Okay, that's it for this file. And as a next step, we need to create a Drizzle config file. So inside our root path of our project, I'm going to create a drizzle.config.ts file. Okay, and to speed up the process, we just paste the config here. First, we need to import the config from the Drizzle kit and then export an object that its type is config. So first we need to define the path of our schema file, and it's in the src directory and then db and then schema.ts file. So we just need to add a /src here, and then we need to define the directory for our actual migrations file, which are kind of SQL scripts for creating our tables inside our database. They will be created by the Drizzle ORM automatically. And then we need to specify the driver, which is better SQLite, and then DB credentials, and then URL, which is actually the path of our database, which will be on the root path of our project. So we don't need to specify a path here. We just need to put the name of our database. Okay, so let's save this. And now we can use the Drizzle kit to create our migrations and our database. But before doing that, in order to be able to use the Drizzle kit, we need to go to our tsconfig.json file and change the target from ES5 to ES6. If you don't do this, you can't use Drizzle kit. So let's save this and let's close this off and open up our terminal. So here I'm going to say npx Drizzle kit generate :SQLite. Okay, and as you can see, it creates a users table with 4 columns for us. Okay, so let's close this up for now. And as a next step, we need to create an API endpoint in which we save the user inside our SQLite database with Drizzle ORM. And when the user successfully sign in into our application, we call this API endpoint, so it will save the user inside our SQLite database. So let me show you what I mean in action. I'm going to create this API endpoint in the /API/auth directory. We can name it success. The name really doesn't matter. You can name it whatever you want, but you can see in a minute that how we can tell the Kinde Auth to automatically call this API endpoint after user has signed in into our application. Okay, so let's create the route handler in the success directory. So in the first step, we need to export a get function. So I'm going to say export async function get, and then inside it we grab the get user function from the get kind server session. So here I'm going to say const for now an empty object and set it to get kind server session function, and then we just need to grab the get user function from it. Okay, and then we can access to the user object. So I'm going to say const user equals to get user function, and now we can check if the user is undefined or user is null or user doesn't have an ID. So here I'm going to put a exclamation mark and then user.id. So in this way we can say that there is an error with the authentication of this user. So we just need to throw a new error and just say something went wrong with the authentication of this user. And if that's not the case, which means that the user is authenticated and we have successfully get the user object with the get user function, we need to check inside our database if such a user is already saved in our database or not. So here I'm going to say const db user, which is the user that we are getting from our database, and set it to db client that we can import from the /db/index file, and then select, then change the from function, and then specify the table that we are running the select statement. It is the user table, so you can see we import the users from the /db/schema file, and then set a filter with the where clause here, and inside it we call the eq function, which checks the equality of two values. In the first argument we say that we want to put the where function on the users.id, and the user.id must be equal with the user.id. So don't confuse this users.id with the user.id. Users.id is the ID inside our users table, but user.id is the user that we've got from the get user function, this user here. So actually we are performing a select statement in our SQL database. We are selecting from the users where the users.id is equal to the ID of the user that we've got from the get user function, our authenticated user that we are getting from the Kinde server session. And then we can check if the user is null, which means that the user is not already saved in our database. We can just save or insert this user in our database. So here we simply check if the db user is null. We can just insert the new user in our database. So here we're going to say db.insert and then specify the name of the table, which is the users, then change the values function, and then put a object here and set its ID to user.id. So again, this user is the user that we've got from the Kinde server session, and then set the first name to the user dot given name, last name to the user dot family name, and the email to user dot email, and then change the run function. And as a last step, we just need to redirect the user to our home page. So here I'm going to say return next response dot redirect and put the address of our home page here. So it's on the HTTP localhost 3000. Okay, that's cool. But how we can tell the Kinde Auth to call this API after a user has signed in into our application? I go to the env file, and here you can see the Kinde post login redirect URL. We just need to set it to the success endpoint that we have just created. So just add a /API/auth/success. So in this way, when the user successfully signing into our application, this API route will be called by the Kinde Auth. So now let's save this and open up our terminal. Here we can run the Drizzle Studio. So I'm going to say npx Drizzle Kit Studio. And as you can see, it will create the SQLite.db here for us. And if I open it, you can see inside our users table, there isn't any user record. So now let's go to our application and click on the sign in, put the code here and click on the continue. So as you can see, now I have signed in into our application, and let's go back to the Drizzle Studio and refresh. And as you can see, it didn't save the user inside our users table. So let's go back to the success API route and double check here. And yeah, you have to chain a get function here. So let's save this and go to our application. Let's sign out again. Again, click on the sign in, put my email, put my code here. You can see that we have signed in into our application, and here let's refresh. And as you can see, the authenticated user is now inserted in our database. You can see my name and my email here. Okay, so you have seen how we can integrate the Drizzle ORM with Kinde Auth to save our users inside a local database. Have a nice time. Bye-bye.